Hello and welcome to the 3D Physio Bulletproof Podcast. All things hamstrings with here my man Jason Joyce from ReJoyce Physio back in Ireland. So Jason obviously has a great podcast, highly recommend, called the Jason Joyce Podcast. Check it out, available on all streams, isn't it?
Yeah, all platforms, yeah.
All platforms. No getting away from you. But brilliant kind of resource for anyone who's kind of interested in nice short snippets with really key kind of good stories and analogies. So anyway, I've asked Jason to come on to kind of the show today just to kind of talk all things hamstrings, just expand on what we've already done as part of the Hamstring 3D Bulletproof program. So Jason, Gaelic footballer, loves a good hamstring, loves a good rehab. Have you ever actually strained your hamstrings?
Once, and it was the worst ever thing. It was in a training, and I went to take around someone, and I got just slightly pushed, and I twinged my hamstring. And it was before a big game, and I actually tried to play the game 5 days later, but I couldn't sprint.
Yeah.
And I couldn't kick a ball fully, so because it was my right hamstring, I was right-footed. So yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare of an injury. But I was back playing fully within 10 days because I did my own rehab.
Yeah, because that's kind of difference, isn't it? It's a case of people have quite different experiences of their hamstrings. I know back home who's been flying back and forth to London playing, but he can only play like 45 minutes of a football game because of his hamstrings. I'm like, that's probably a sign that he hasn't rehabbed it to that high level you have. I had the kind of almost contrasting experiences when I was kind of younger. The case of, again, tweak the hamstring, kind of then just before a big county final game, went to see the physio. She just massaged it, just rubbed it, no rehab, no strength conditioning, and just rubbed until I was like painful and agony. And it didn't make any difference to the actual game. I was able to get out and, couldn't even kick the ball out from goals. And that's a experience that I see and hear happen quite a bit back and around Gaelic football circles. So kind of in terms of Jay obviously plays Round Towers, Clondalkin up in Dublin. Have they incorporated any kind of like Gaelic football hamstring specific warm-ups, conditioning in the training setup up there?
I suppose I'll just even go back a bit. Like I specialise in kind of lower limb injuries, especially in Gaelic football, so hips, hamstrings, quads. And for me, when I see a hamstring that's a grade 1 and they're 6 weeks, 7 weeks, whatever, if they're more than 2 months out still with a hamstring, I get really upset. So that really annoys me. And if I see someone doing a second hamstring and they've done a period of time out rehabbing, I go a bit nuts because obviously you're a risk factor. The biggest risk factor for hamstring injuries is a previous hamstring injury. But like, you need to come back stronger than you were because there's a reason you injured it. So all my clients will be going back stronger and fitter than where you work harder when you're injured. And people don't realise that. And in Dublin, I see exactly I see so many people, I stretched it, I left it. I thought if I stretched it, it'd be better. I'm like, all right, how did that go? It was getting worse. So I kept on. And they don't come to physio, some of them. Some people just go to masseuse. Some people play on for a whole season. So, yeah, we have a really good management team in a place at the moment. And I was asked, so I created an actually players injury database, and I created a profiling system and a pre-training mobility, upper limb, lower limb, and kind of functional, which is kind of just match specific. Kind of, when I say functional, I mean like kind of bringing in lunges with rotation, stuff specific to the match. So I say functional, I'm nearly saying weight bearing and specific to the match. So yeah, I created one of them this year. But I actually did my master's on our team actually 6 years ago. I looked at functional movement screens pre-season and I followed them throughout the season. And it showed that the people who had their mobility less than a 14 and a functional movement 14 out of 21 were 12 times more likely to get a lower limb injury from non-contact. So yeah, you need a system in place for success. It's nuts if you don't, especially in this day and age. In Dublin, I don't know many clubs that don't have a system anyway.
Yeah, and kind of that's it. In terms of kind of when it comes to hamstrings, for the listeners, it's a case of the functional movement screen is a basic test, just basic low level kind of.
Just a basic one, so it's not specific to the hamstring.
Yeah. And kind of the best kind of rehab for hamstrings is sprinting. The best strength you can do if you're
at the end of phase, yeah. Well, actually, by the way, sorry, the GAA, the injury profile, 23% of injuries are hamstrings. Yeah. You know, like that's crazy.
Yeah, and then when you go into like Australian rules football, I think it kind of ranges 18 to 34%. 20 odd percent of it's your biceps femoris, which is your kind of main fast twitch kind of muscle. It kind of tends to go is because it has like two nerve supplies, and it kind of just fatigues, which is when people are sprinting and kind of have that big grab that back of the leg and kind of go down. And kind of in terms of in gyms, it's not a big sexy muscle to treat or rehab, so people don't do it. So when you kind of see a lot of kind of gyms, they don't do any Nordic specific strength and conditioning. You get your bread and butter in deadlifts, squats, lunges, but people don't kind of do any specific hamstring Nordics. Which infuriates me.
Yeah, well, do you know what? Like Connor, who we were training with, now he's top notch strength and conditioning coach, and he's with the intercounty hurlers, the Dublin hurlers. He'd have a lot of just hamstring. He'd superset the hamstring sliders, for example, or single leg sliders, or actually glue ham raises or Nordics. He'd superset them with an upper body, you know. So he has them involved, and I don't think he's any hamstring injuries at all.
That's kind of catch it. I have a few friends that work at Newcastle Falcons, and they stopped doing Nordics because players didn't like them, because it does leave you the kind of DOMS effect. The key thing with the Nordics is that people kind of forget about is you don't need to go and do loads, 4 repetitions, 3 to 4 sets.
I was going to say, the danger is in the dosage.
Yeah. And kind of people need to be doing them as a benchmark before they kind of get back to them kind of sprint type activities in my eyes. And that's go to as a basic testing. Do you have any kind of pitch kind of pre-game return to play kind of protocol that you follow when it comes to hamstring injuries?
To be honest, so you just talking about generic stuff.
Yeah.
My graded return, I focus a lot on the hip and the core, because the hamstring is an extension of the hip. If you think, I always say the hip is the driver of the bus, the knee is the passenger, and the hamstring kind of connects both of them. So what I have specific stuff, I like glue ham raises. I do like single leg bridge with a knee lift, and I like hamstring walkouts. So a bridge hamstring walkout, I would be a fan of them. I'm a big fan of kind of like single leg RDL stuff like that, and activation, and then just incremental sprints, just building up the acceleration phase and then slowing down the deceleration phase, and then just shortening that period of time.
And that's
so that's just generic, like, you know, but I'm big into strengthening the hip from all 3 planes of motion first. And and obviously there's a massive element of endurance. Hamstring is a massive fatigue muscle as well. So like you need to have all the bases at check as well.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting just hearing your take, kind of more hip dominant. I'm kind of a bit more foot. Everything's kind of cueing the foot, because in my eyes, the foot's the first structure that contacts the ground. It's foot, calf, hamstring, then glutes firing. Again, there's lots of different ways to skin a cat.
I suppose I don't ignore the foot like you don't ignore the hip. I suppose I focus kind of higher up the chain, because hip injuries are such a problem in GAA. And if you look at the massive problem, if you're going, what's the biggest problem in GAA? I'd say it's hips, because of the surgeries. People being retired at 27, you know, so you're doing a bulletproof program for GAA players. Like the biggest epidemic we have in Ireland is total hips at 27. And there's no control there. So if you've no control, especially rotation, the hamstring's going to overwork. If the hamstring's overwork, it's going to pull when you're sprinting, especially when you're tired. It's doing so much, and then the last 5 minutes of match, you're busting the gut to get in on goal or whatever it is, and the hamstring goes, and it's because your hip is a bit lazy. Yeah, and I suppose I do look at the foot. I probably should look at it a bit more though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interestingly, I kind of heard Dr. Andy Franklin Miller, who's the
SSC
at a Sanctuary Sports Clinic. He was over in Newcastle here doing a talk back in September time. And interestingly enough, pulled out all his very well presented slides and everything else. And he was discussing his research in terms of hip and groin kind of pain and surgeries and so forth. And he found that, and he kind of found it almost comical, and it was quite nice to see how humble he was. He found that actually all his research has recently linked in the groin pain to the biggest predictor is the rate of force development at the foot. So that rate of development at the foot, and if you're not kind of engaging that foot with intent, as you push off that foot, you absorb the impact into the groin, and then you do a twisted motion, which overloads the groin structures or hamstrings or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And he was saying the biggest kind of indicator is actually working on that kind of foot rate of force development. And it's quite interesting because I was at a course of his maybe 8 years ago, and someone actually did put their hand up and say, have you not considered the role in the foot in this? And Andy Franklin Miller and Éanna Falvey, who was the Irish rugby doctor, literally laughed at her. And it's nice to see him eat a piece of humble cake. So it's kind of just something to consider, particularly if you're in football or coaching or training yourself. Focus on cueing the foot, because someone has an injury, the only thing that they can link in terms of have a point of reference is their foot. Because in a Gaelic foot,
what do you mean by cueing the foot?
So in terms of explode off the ground, like your jet plane taking off, or so kind of if you're going into, say, standing in front, changing direction, doing a 45-degree sprint to your right, what you want to do is if you're going to change direction to go left, you cue them to, with that right foot, when it hits the ground to change direction, you explode off the ground like a jet plane taking off. The reason is that you want to use an external cue, being something outside your body. So when you have an injury or when you're fatigued or learning a new skill, which we all will be in the next couple of weeks, months, getting back to football and sport, it's a case of if you have an internal cue, you behave like a novice, which then actually prevents you performing at your best. So a lot of the work done by Nick Winkelman, who's the IRFU head of athletic development, and he's done a load of work around the neuroplasticity of it, being how the brain and how the nervous system processes external versus internal cues. I am a complete nerd, but
and stuff. It's all back to self-talk and beliefs and stuff.
Yeah. So kind of it links back into all, your big trend of kind of the last decade or even 20 years around the kind of UK, Ireland has been like Pilates type stuff, where a lot of the cueing is internal, or suck your belly in, do this with your trans abs, do this with your hip. But the reality of the situation is, when it comes to sport and movement, is your pain there, we don't know where our hip, hamstring or knee or ankle is, so we need to give it a point of reference. And I always compare it, it's like trying to shoot it going off a boat. If your boat's unstable, that doesn't have a point of reference, you're not going to hit your target. So we need a point.
Cannon from a canoe.
Canoe. I like a boat. People can go into the whole nuances of what's a canoe, what's a kayak. And it's a Canadian, and it just doesn't want to avoid. Wants to.
That makes sense, because when we're on our masters, when we had all the S&C coaches from Munster and Ulster with us, it was like cheek to cheek. It was all external stuff, and it makes so much sense. And there was always little phrases, Yeah,
because it all links into. I don't know for those of you who follow golf, but remember a few years ago, Tiger Woods was playing shit. And then kind of he finished a game of golf and was like, I wasn't engaging my glutes. It's like, you're the best golfer in the world. When have you ever thought about engaging your glutes? So
if he's talking about that's nonsense. He's deferring people off what was going on. That was good psychology there.
Yeah, and kind of so he just attributed the glutes to be the cause of his problem, where it actually had nothing to do with his glutes. It was, you're the best golfer in the world, or in the world. Go out, swing through the ball, strike through it like you would normally. That's all the only cue you need. And much like in Ireland, Pádraig Harrington went similar, kind of down a very complex cognitive level, heavy of trying to understand why he was playing crap, and then he started over analyzing things because he was doing everything internally. So
we'll go on a rant here about the psychological impact of just a process, So,
yeah, but back to grounding. So
what I was going to ask you about there is, like, I would look a lot at what I find in football is there's a big lack of ankle dorsiflexion. So I'd work a good bit about that. And Connor, actually, a big one we do is pogos. You know pogos?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'd be about rate of force development there, yeah? Because you're just bang, 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 yeah. So pogos, I suppose, yeah, there is pogos in the program.
Yeah, so that's your beautiful, that's kind of that rate of force development and really working on the kind of cueing of it. And kind of even when it comes to running, you see a lot of people in Gaelic football circles, even the lads playing top flight, they kind of overstride sometimes. So, who's your perfect example? Someone like your Donny Vaughns, who was a big, massive stride. And I know from kind of a friend of a friend, who's his cousin, that he crippled with like loads of hamstring, groin issues and whatever else. And some little cues have kind of shortened the stride.
Did you ever see Fitzsimon's walk for Dublin? He hyperextends both knees.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, he's had a lot of hamstring issues. A lot.
Yeah, because ideally you want the hamstrings to be long and strong, and if he's hyperextending his knees, just shows he's
done a lot of work though. I've heard he's done a lot of work on them.
Yeah. And kind of for kind of people listening, what would be your kind of top kind of 3 tips for people managing hamstring injuries, say early stage?
Simple. Top 3. 1, strengthen straight away. So no matter what, if you can do a glute bridge day 1, be doing a glute bridge because you're avoiding atrophy. So that's my top 1 straight away. Like, so someone goes, Jay, I've injured my hamstring. I'm like, okay, can you do a glute bridge? If you can, yes, because you don't want to start to atrophy. Then you want to optimize healing. So you're like ice. I'm big into ice just for pain sensitivity. I can go on a mad one about all that stuff. Ice, rest, elevate, but getting it contracted as well. And then the second one, so important. Don't stretch it for the first 10 days. Don't rip. If you cut your arm and you have a big scab, you don't just start pulling the scab off it. So that's what you had a horror show with your one. She was kind of elbowing you up the hamstring. She's pulling all your scar tissue off. So you had this torn hamstring that was really vulnerable. And not only did she inhibit your hamstrings, you went out for actually naked. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh no, I actually feel pain in my hamstring thinking about it. So don't stretch in the early phases and start strength ASAP and just build it up gradually. Like you got that strong foundation of strength around the hips, the feet, the core, and then build on it and find where your weaknesses are, because there's always a few weaknesses. So in my early stages there, I'd be like strength, optimal healing by optimal scar tissue, and then where are the weaknesses? Why did this break down? A lot of people don't think, they focus, he's torn his hamstring is a grade 1. No, there's a reason he did that. There's a weakness somewhere. We have a massive opportunity here to actually get him even higher when he goes back, or her higher,
Yeah.
They're my top 3.
Yeah, I'm the kind of same. It's a case of any injury is an opportunity to get better. Kind of the second someone comes into me, I'll be asking them from an injury perspective, right, okay, this is what's going on here. We're going to put a plan in place for this. And then I kind of, over getting to know them, would actually delve in, right, endurance, speed, power, fatigue, kind of technical or tactical aspects of the game, right? Yeah. Are they kind of lacking any of them? Because if you're injured, can't play, whatever, right, well, can we improve on the technical and tactical aspects? So then when you come back, you don't have to be working as hard to get into them positions as you had previously. So kind of that's a nice little kind of tip for any kind of coaches, managers out there. The other
So what do you mean technical? What would you be like? Oh, just timing your runs better, or
timing, yeah, positional point of view. So your positional sometimes might be your kind of technique running wise. So again, a bit of gait re-education from the running perspective. It might be just focusing on the relationships with the people around you. So, everyone's still going to train, and the worst thing you do if you're a team player and you get injured and then just step back and don't go to training, that's terrible, because
that's the worst thing you can do, psychologically, physically, emotionally, everything.
And just further on from what you're saying about the optimal healing, and I went to James Moore course, who's a top level physio over here, who kind of works with UK Athletics. And he was saying that compression actually works quite well as well. So first couple of days, compress the hell out of it. If you have shorts, stocking, trousers, or even just kind of sleeve, absolutely does no harm to kind of compress it up.
Yeah. I went to a really good course in Scotland about 5 years ago, and he was actually the head of the rehab for the FAI. And he was talking about that, and he said, not even ice, he said cold compress, because he goes, if you have a hot swollen joint, what's the complete opposite? He goes, ice. So he goes, a cold compress has a shorter transference, you know what I mean? I don't know what's the word there. So he goes, actually, if you have ice and you really compress it, like you said, compression, he goes, that'll have a much better. So I'd get something cold and wet it in wet a tea towel and compress as much as can. I normally encourage 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a day. But if they're sitting around all day, they can up that, like.
Yeah. Even if they're sitting around, you can use that as a kind of good isometric. So isometrics is kind of where it helps kind of the brain process the pain as such. So if they are sitting down, office-based job, focus on that foot. Imagine pushing your foot down in. Imagine pushing your foot down into beach or sand, or making a footprint on the beach, or squashing some blueberries, making some wine, pushing the foot down, and you'll feel your hamstring contract. It's a nice little way of kind of getting that.
Yeah. Yeah. And Joe, it's mad. Some people come back to me like, how are you getting on? Oh yeah, I just keep on pushing every day just to see how it is. I'm like, just stop trying to trigger your hamstring and just let it heal, you know what I mean? That again is like lifting up the scab a tiny bit, looking under. Oh Jesus, still torn there.
Yeah, it's no harm to test it out once a week.
Poke the bear.
Yeah.
Huh?
No harm to test out once a week, but almost have a kind of like,
yeah, not every day. Like, don't poke the bear, like, you know.
Poking the bear.
That you remind me of that, because a lot of people go, oh yeah, when I pull off my shoe with the other leg, I'm like, that's a nice isometric contraction. But if it's killing you, don't keep on doing that. Like, just untie the shoelaces and take your shoe off.
Late stage, what would be your top tips, 3 of them for late stage?
It's all about, number one is all about preparing for the sport they're going back into, you know. And for me, I'm all about strengthening that hamstring in a lengthened position. So if you think about like the sport, the Gaelic, it's most vulnerable in the last 15 minutes of a match when it's just about to hit the heel strike on the ground. So that means it's a small bit of flexion. You probably know the angle better, 5, 10, 15 degrees, whatever it is. And
15 to
so
30
it's in a lengthened
degrees.
position. What is it?
It's like 15 to 30 degrees.
Yeah, so 15. And if so, that position, and it's going to hit the ground, and where it's at its longest point of contraction. So that'd be mine. I'd be like really working them in them end range stages of strengthening. And then I'd be bringing up the strength, obviously, to power explosion, and then trying to fatigue the hamstring with that as well. They're kind of would be my main. So strength, explosiveness, and then obviously you have to bring in sprint training.
Say something about psychology or the mind or the mindset. What? I'm shocked.
I'm going around. I have to calm. Yeah, I'm all about that. Like, but to be honest, like, that's hamstring specific. But like, if a client of mine is going back into a match and they're not confident in that hamstring, I'm like, there's no point playing. You don't believe in your hamstring. Like, that's worse than having a hamstring problem, you know, because you don't believe in it. You're not going to push yourself. You're going to actually just annoy yourself. So I get into their heads, but you know me. The pain comes from that, isn't it?
But it's definitely, it's kind of that confidence, that intent. So intent in the rehab side of things is where you build up that physical confidence. But
and I build it up session by session. And not only that, like, as I said earlier, I have the client gone back feeling stronger. So confidence is never really an issue. And they're always chomping. So I might pull them back a small bit. When I mean chomping, they're always just mad to get back. So I don't know who's listening to this. They're just mad to get back. The confidence actually isn't even an issue. They feel strong. They're like, Jay, just let me go back. I've nearly just psyched them into it where they're not even considering anymore. They're like, Jay, I don't want to do this anymore. Just let me get back. I feel too good. So if you get someone like that, like they're on your side, you're on their side. And I think that can't be just one session. That's you bring in your mental aspect of it all, like, and you go.
That starts day one.
Yeah, exactly. Like session one, they're coming in with a torn hamstring. You have 45 minutes. Well, I have 45 minutes with a client. I give them the diagnosis, what all that crap done in the first 25 minutes, and then we're getting into the head. All right, I'm with Gaelic players. Me personally, I'm a Gaelic player. I need to know a goal. I need to know all this. I'm like, all right. And I get into their head because some of them tried to go back earlier. Like me, I tried to play a match and I'll never forget it because I was a free taker as well. And I couldn't reach I couldn't reach it. No, and we drew that day. And I honestly think if I probably wasn't playing, I don't think we would have drawn. I think we would have won if I wasn't playing because I probably missed 2 frees.
Next one. I wanted to circle back to something there that you're mentioning.
Yeah, it summarizes with that. Like you get in their head and you're on their side, and like you show them. I believe every injury is a chance to get better. Like as you said, you even brought up a new level. Technically, I don't even bring in the technical. I'm like, go watch the matches, go watch the players. But like, you probably go a bit more advanced. I think that's excellent. You know.
Sometimes it's a case of it's needed. Sometimes you kind of you have to make that gut instinct decision, whether a bit more head based or a bit more body based. And I've done that a few times. Sometimes it's gone well, sometimes it's gone horribly wrong. But for kind of the people listening in Gaelic football wise, get strong, can't go wrong with getting strong. And then the muscle wants to be long and strong, and then get from there pretty much. Again,
I'd be a big fan of like end range hamstring bridges. I'd nearly say single legs. I'd be a big fan of them. And then I think it was you in the video, was it? You were actually had the ball on and you were kind of doing scissor kicks on the ball. That like I hadn't seen it. I was like, that is unreal.
Hamstring tantrums.
What is it?
Hamstring tantrums.
Oh, there you go. That's class. You can be very creative with the hamstring. I love it. Like.
Yeah. And this is the key thing. If you do pull your hamstring or you do kind of have a niggle that you're thinking, right, this isn't as strong as it could be. If it's not challenging you, it's not changing you. So kind of make sure the exercises is at the right level. So it should be challenging you. You should be gassing out kind of like I'm actually fatigued and aching for the next 24 to 48 hours. Sometimes people get scared by that. But much like you go to a gym session, you have that kind of ache the next day. With rehab, is the same. You should be having that kind of ache for a few hours after, or definitely the next day at least. It's put 48 hours. You probably pushed it just a smidgen too much too soon. And just tone it back and just kind of work it from there.
Yeah.
Performance point of view, when it comes to sport and injury, because it's some of the people on the kind of course and on the 3D Bulletproof program aren't doing it from an injury perspective. They just want to get shit hot and perform better when it comes to the pitch. Any performance physio related tips that you would kind of give them?
Any performance physio related tips? Geez, that's a tricky one. Performance. Ooh. For me, see, that's pretty hard to be generic. So performance related. So for me, for performance, like I need to relax before a match. All right, simple. Because football is so important to me. And if I overhype the game, I'll underperform. Nearly have performance anxiety. So know what type of person you are, how you respond to it. Just, I'd say address the 4 quadrants: the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, you know. And what I mean by that is physically getting the best performance based, I don't know, getting the best shape physically. So what? Sleep well, unbelievable. So we had a talk from Jim Gavin 6 months ago, just before he won his 5 in a row. Or was it just after? He's my club,
I'm talking
right?
about it. Go on. Get on
Yeah.
the point.
He goes to us straight away. He goes, I've no silver bullet. And he goes, actually, sorry, if I do have one, and he just stopped himself, it's sleep. So your sleep, your nutrition, and your physical conditioning, and all the stuff we talked about, yeah, that's one quadrant. That's only 25% of the pie. But so many people focus on that. How is your mental quadrant? How is your self-talk during a match when you make a mistake? How is your mental game, your visualization, your affirmations? What are you saying to yourself? So for performance, I trained that quadrant. So I did a lot of work with the hurlers. I was their mental strength and conditioning coach last year, and he won the championship. And just subtle things like triggers. I did a big anchor thing, touching their head every ulnar. When they touched that, like, I had this visualization process. It was all about feeling safe, feeling connected with their team, working hard, working together. And then also your emotions, which I mentioned. So for me, if you're getting anxious before the game, that's an element of fear. And I delve into, what's that fear telling me about me? Oh, there's a fear of failure there. And that's always my issue. I'm like, what does failure mean to me? And I used to have such a wrong idea what failure was. I used to think success was here and failure is there. That's completely wrong. Success is here and failure is right in front of it. You know, you're gonna make a mistake in a match. But for me, I was afraid. So I'd address the 3 quadrants, not just the physical. So that is, if you want to perform better, look at your mental game, look at your emotional game, look at your physical game, and control what you can control, but also just have fun. That's where I bring the spiritual quadrant in. Why are you playing sport? And if you're overthinking it, just think of how you were when you were 7 years old playing a game of football. You know what I mean? And that actually gave me the best help ever. Just go out like a kid, because when you're a kid, you're present. You rest when you need to rest. You laugh when you need to laugh. You don't take it too serious. But guess what? You play the best football.
Yeah. It's tapping into your limbic system, which is part of your brain that just goes back to basic fundamentals. And I deal with patients all the time when they have kind of pain, and it's that emotion, that feeling, that kind of thought of when they're at their best, and like their face just comes up, and it's just like they're just ecstatic. It's like, oh, cool. But
yeah, I remember I was in a championship final, minor, bloody disaster. And I was so afraid to make a mistake, I didn't look for the ball. And it was the worst game ever, because I got the ball twice. You know, and now it's gas how you can work yourself up. And physically, I was perfect. Mentally, physically strong, fit, no hamstrings, no injuries, ate well, slept well. Sure, it isn't worth the while. So performance wise, you just need to know that we're more than just a physical self.
Yeah, it's kind of mind game, and kind of I don't know if I ever told you this story, but it was kind of a lovely story of knowing how that affects people. So in terms of kind of that mental game and that physical game and how it's all interlinked, we were away with I was working as a physio with the Great Britain basketball team, and we're away championship over in Israel or something. And the head coach, very flamboyant Spanish dude, psychology professor, and he brought everyone in 3 hours before a game. I laid everyone out on the ground in this kind of meeting room, and they're discussing and doing like a guided meditation, visualization, affirmations, and all. And I went in and I was like, shit. And I grabbed 3 or 4 of the players. It was a GB female team, so I grabbed 3 or 4 of the players, because it was like, if they got grounded and wound down before a game, it would have been impossible to ramp them back up for the actual game. So
go out to chilled Bob Marley.
Yeah, like a few of them were kind of like quite hypermobile, quite like floppy kind of just people, and you know, they weren't kind of relaxed. They're the ones who the floppy ones who had to listen to hardcore music to get ramped up and get psyched up before a game. As you were saying, if you're kind of you know that have that performance anxiety, you'd be needing that kind of just relax, that kind of breathing, that kind of calming.
Exactly, where that would have been ideal for me.
Yeah, and
that might piss someone else off going here, and they actually would go into a match frustrated instead of amped up. Yeah, really good book on that is Bounce by Matthew Syed. He spent 4 years training for it, and he just went out and he lost all his skills. He's back to a novice because the brain just switched off.
Yeah, because even like this, the head coach, he was He was obviously head coach of the senior women's team as well, and worked like with Real Madrid, and he's been at every Olympics since like the 1960s. He was like, he didn't say anything. He knew I had a reason for justification for what I was doing, but he came up after. Was like, darn, what? Why did you pull the girls out? It's like, you wouldn't have got them ramped up for the game later on, and that would have been a nightmare. And then we would have kind of blew the championship. And he was like, fair enough, happy days. It's like, sweet.
Yeah.
Brings to a nice close, my man. Thank you very much, Jo.
Great chat.
Hope kind of everyone found some value in the podcast. And any questions, any queries, just kind of add it into the group. Kind of Jay is part of the group as well, so he can give you his insights into Clondalkin.
The Dublin GAA.
Yeah. Clondalkin GA or Clondalkin?
Yeah, that's gas.
But check out his podcast, the Jason Joyce show. Yeah.
Podcast.
So kind of absolutely pearls of wisdom there. So kind of definitely check him out. Hopefully found it helpful. And as ever, if there's any questions, just drop either of us a line, social media, or on the actual 3D Bulletproof hamstring program. Enjoy. All the best.